It is bracket week, and we are going to break into Gary Parrish's bracket right now and go through the whole darn thing. Gary, thank you for joining us. Let's start in the West region, and in the West, that is where we have the #1 overall seed, the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Of course, Gary has them advancing past Georgia State in that very first game. But Gary, you have them advancing to take on the Memphis Tigers, and living in Memphis, it's been a tumultuous season for Penny Hardaway, hasn't it?
Oh, it really has. I mean, this is a preseason top 20 team that was 9-8 through its first 17 games. Chemistry problems, injury problems, COVID problems. People, even diehard Memphis fans who have loved Penny Hardaway for 30 plus years, were starting to question whether he could get this job done. And boy, they really turned it around. Since January 28th, at BartTorvik.com, if you run the numbers, Memphis has the 6th best adjusted efficiency margin in the entire country. That means, according to one metric, Memphis has been a top 6 team in the country since January 28th. Now, why do I pick that date? Because that's the date Amani Bates, the 5-star freshman, stopped playing for the Tigers. Once he was gone, the chemistry got better, the rotation tightened, and the Tigers are really operating at a high level for nearly 2 straight months now.
All right, let's move down to the 4 and 5 seed matchups. Connecticut, the 5 seed, taking on New Mexico State and advancing past the Aggies, and Arkansas getting past Vermont in Gary Parrish's bracket. A lot of our experts like Vermont in that game, but Gary going chalk there. Now, Alabama is going to take on the winner of Rutgers and Notre Dame. Gary, which team, Rutgers or Notre Dame, do you think gets past Bama?
I think Rutgers. Notre Dame is a team that I don't believe should have been in the tournament. When you look at the body of work, they've got 21 wins on the season. 17 of them were against Quadrant 3 or Quadrant 4 opponents. They had a big win over Kentucky, and apparently that was enough, but Notre Dame really hasn't done much this season. I'll take Rutgers to beat Notre Dame, and then Rutgers to beat Alabama.
Okay, and Texas Tech advancing past Montana State. Let's move down to the bottom here in the West region. Davidson upsetting Michigan State, and that would set up a matchup between Bob McKillop, head coach at Davidson, and Coach K in the second round as Duke advanced past Cal State Fullerton. All right, so we're into the second round here in the West region of Gary Parrish's bracket. Gonzaga and Memphis, and the Gonzaga Bulldogs advance past the Memphis Tigers. In the 4-5 matchup, it's Arkansas getting past Connecticut. Let's go down to the bottom now. Rutgers is the team that he has advancing from that first 4 matchup, but Texas Tech beats Rutgers to advance to the Sweet 16, and Coach K gets past Bob McKillop. All right, to the Sweet 16 we go. Gonzaga, Arkansas, Gonzaga getting past the Hogs, and it's Duke and Coach K getting past Texas Tech. Gary, would that be the #1 matchup in regional play, Gonzaga against Duke?
Not even close. Our television executives at CBS have no control over the way the bracket unfolds, obviously, but I promise you, if we ended up with an Elite 8 game between Gonzaga, the #1 overall seed, and Mike Krzyzewski in his final NCAA tournament ever, coaching Duke, arguably the biggest brand in the sport, everybody would be happy. That would be a ratings bonanza. You cannot do better in the Elite 8 than that Gonzaga-Duke matchup.
And you have Gonzaga advancing past Duke in what would be Coach K's final game, unless he pulls a Tom Brady and decides not to retire. So that is the winner in the West, Gonzaga. Let's move down to the East region, where the Baylor Bears, the defending champions, are the #1 seed. Baylor advancing past Norfolk State, Marquette, and North Carolina. It's Marquette, the 9 seed in that matchup, according to Gary. And then St. Mary's is going to face the winner of Wyoming and Indiana. Gary, which team do you think would give St. Mary's a better game?
I think Wyoming. Listen, Wyoming has not played well down the stretch. There's no getting around it. 5-4 in their past 9 games. But that's a team, because I'm in studio every Tuesday and Wednesday night for CBS Sports Network, and our late game tends to be a Mountain West game. I've seen them a lot. I really like, Graham Ike, Hunter Maldonado, the 1 and the 5, averaging combined 38 points per game. It's the most productive 1-5 combo in the country. I think Wyoming beats Indiana in the first 4, but then ultimately loses to St. Mary's.
All right, St. Mary's moving on to face UCLA. The Bruins getting by the Zips in the 4-13 game. Now down to the 6-11, which is an intriguing matchup because the computers love Virginia Tech. But, Gary, you like the Texas Longhorns to prevail.
Yeah, and this is one of those where it just feels like everybody's picking Virginia Tech, so I'm going to go opposite. There's not a lot of stuff supporting what I'm doing here. Virginia Tech just knocked out North Carolina and Duke in back-to-back games, playing really well. Texas enters on a 3-game losing streak. But don't forget, Chris Beard has already established himself as one of the great tournament coaches in this sport. Obviously, took Texas Tech to its first Elite Eight, took Texas Tech to its first national championship game. I'm not predicting a run like that, but I do think the Longhorns can get past a Virginia Tech team that, wasn't even going to make the NCAA tournament, 6 days ago.
And Texas would advance to face Purdue. You have them getting by Yale. Purdue lost in the Big Ten championship game to Iowa, but Jaden Ivey could be the number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft. Certainly a player to watch in this tournament. Great game on CBS late Thursday night, 9:40 Eastern Time. Gary has Murray State getting past the Dons of San Francisco to face the Kentucky Wildcats, who advance past St. Peter's. So we're into the second round here in the East region of Gary Parrish's bracket. Baylor taking on Marquette. And it's the defending champion Baylor Bears getting to the Sweet 16, and Philadelphia, the East Regional, to face UCLA, who Gary has getting past the St. Mary's Gales. Now down to the bottom, and it is chalk in this region. Purdue past Texas and Kentucky. In that Battle of Kentucky, that is Murray, Kentucky, where the Racers hail from, but Kentucky getting by then. But we got a matchup between Baylor and UCLA. Couple of teams that made the Final Four last season. Gary, why do you think the Bruins are going to get past the Bears?
Listen, if I had to vote for Coach of the Year right now, I'd probably go Tommy Lloyd at Arizona. But if I didn't go with him, I would go with Scott Drew at Baylor. What Scott has done with this team is incredible. Lost 4 starters from last season's title team. Still kept the Bears at the tip-top of the sport. Lost Jonathan Chachua, one of their very important bigs midseason, to a devastating knee injury. And L.J. Cryer has only played once since January 25th, and he hasn't played at all since the middle of February. And yet Baylor was still able to get a 1 seed in this NCAA tournament. But eventually, losing 2 of your top 6 players is going to show up. And though Baylor has not ruled L.J. Cryer out of any games, most people in the sport do not believe he's going to be able to play in this NCAA tournament. At that point, simply put, I know Baylor had the better resume. That's why Baylor got the 1 seed. But in their current forms, who's available, who's not, I think UCLA's the better team.
And a lot of talent in these top 4 seeds in this region. You could say all 4 of those teams could have a chance at one point during this season to be picked to win the national championship. UCLA, the 4 seed, advancing to the Elite Eight, and then it's Kentucky getting past Purdue, a team in Purdue that a lot of us picked to win the national championship going into this season. So UCLA and Kentucky, who prevails?
UCLA. Listen, I really like both of those teams. There was a time where, before the bracket comes out, you start imagining who you think can play in a Final Four, who do you believe is going to make the title game. UCLA and Kentucky are 2 teams that I thought are, and they clearly are still strong candidates to make the Final Four. They just got put in the same region, and, when forced to pick between the 2, I'll take that UCLA team for back-to-back Final Fours.
Okay, so Gonzaga and now UCLA into Gary Parrish's Final Four as we move to the South region. And we're going to speed through this because a lot of this is chalk in Gary Parrish's bracket. Arizona to face Seton Hall. Seton Hall getting past TCU. Now down to Houston against the Conference USA champion UAB Blazers. Houston getting by there to face the Illinois Fighting Illini, who get past Chattanooga. Now the 6-11 game is interesting because Colorado State is the 6th, but they are the underdogs in this game. So even though it's chalk, it would be an upset. That's a Colorado State team knocking off a team that Gary says could be his Cinderella this season, the Michigan Wolverines, because of that double-digit seed. Colorado State beating your Cinderella. How does that happen?
I sit in studio every Tuesday and Wednesday night, watch a lot of Mountain West Conference basketball. I like all four of those Mountain West Conference teams, and Colorado State especially. It's interesting. Boise State in the Mountain West, they were the regular season champs and the Mountain West Tournament champs, and yet Colorado State is the highest seeded Mountain West Conference team. They are led by David Roddy, the Mountain West Conference Player of the Year, 6'5", 250. Just a traditional undersized big who can also step away from the basket, knock down a shot. I think David Roddy is going to have a chance to be one of the real breakout stars of the early round of this NCAA tournament. I think he gets Colorado State past a Michigan team that, frankly, just hasn't been very good this season.
But then they would have to face Tennessee, who you have getting past Longwood. Tennessee, a team many of us thought should have been at least a 2 seed. So Ohio State and the 10 seed Loyola Chicago, they've been a staple in March the last several seasons, but it's Ohio State winning that battle, and it will be a matchup between the Buckeyes and Villanova Sunday in Pittsburgh. So we're into the second round here, South Regional on Gary Parrish's bracket. Chalk, top 8 seeds all advancing in the first round, and more of the same into the Sweet 16. Arizona past Seton Hall, Illinois past Houston. And down to the bottom, Tennessee knocking off David Roddy and Colorado State. Villanova past Ohio State. So the top 4 seeds advancing here. Arizona past Illinois. But Gary, it's Tennessee getting past Villanova, setting up Arizona against the Vols.
Yeah, and you'll remember those two teams have already played once this season. It was in Knoxville. Tennessee won the game. That would be a great Elite Eight matchup. But ultimately, I think as well as the Vols have been playing SEC tournament champions, Arizona is just the superior team. And I think Arizona wins that game and advances to the Final Four in Tommy Lloyd's first season as head coach.
Okay, so Arizona joins UCLA and Gonzaga in Gary Parrish's Final Four. One more region to pick. It's the Midwest region. Many believe this is the most gettable region, where Kansas is the 1 seed. Kansas moving on to the second round to face San Diego State, winners of the Mountain West Tournament. Iowa against Richmond, the Hawkeyes getting past the Spiders, who only got in because they won the A-10 tournament. South Dakota State, though, that is a sleek pick. They're only 2-point underdogs against Providence. The Jackrabbits getting by the Friars in Gary's bracket. Let's move down to LSU and Iowa State. And Gary, you like Iowa State to win that game, even though they've really struggled down the stretch. Why?
LSU just fired its head coach over the weekend, and you don't have any idea what that has done to the mindset of that team, of those players. But you can reasonably assume they haven't been as focused on the task at hand as other teams have been. Suddenly they're going to be coached by, yes, somebody who has Division I head coaching experience, but not somebody who is the coach of this team. I just think there's so much going on with LSU in that program that Iowa State is able to catch them in the first round.
That would be an amazing win for the Iowa State basketball program, coming off just a 2-win season last year. TJ Otzelberger's done a great job. They would face Wisconsin in Milwaukee on Sunday. Gary also has Miami, the 10 seed, taking out 7th-seeded USC to take on the Auburn Tigers in the second round. So let's move on to our second round matchups here in our Midwest region of Gary Parrish's bracket. It's Kansas getting to Chicago, the Midwest Regional, past San Diego State, and Iowa knocking off the Jackrabbits of South Dakota State. To the bottom, it's Wisconsin beating Iowa State, basically a home game in Milwaukee, and Auburn past Miami. So we have our Sweet 16 set here. It's 1, 2, 3, and 5 seeds. Kansas getting past Iowa, and Auburn past Wisconsin. And how do you see that Kansas-Auburn game going?
I like both of these teams. I mean, you're talking about a Big 12 champion and an SEC champion, but ultimately, I think Bruce Pearl's Tigers are just a little more talented than Bill Self's Jayhawks. Ochai Agbaji has been incredible for KU, But Auburn's got Jabari Smith, the guy who could be the #1 pick in the 2022 NBA draft, one of the best rim protectors in the country, and Walker Kessler. Auburn's guards have been a little shaky, but ultimately I'm going to trust them here. I think Auburn advances to the Final Four for the second time under Bruce Pearl.
Okay, so 2 1s, a 2, and a 4 seed in Gary Parrish's Final Four. He has Gonzaga getting past UCLA, cue up the old Gus Johnson call with Adam Morrison crying, and Arizona against Auburn in the other Arizona getting past Auburn. So championship game, Gary, Gonzaga against Arizona.
And man, that would be a tremendous storyline. As you know, Tommy Lloyd at Arizona was an assistant coach at Gonzaga for 2 decades under Mark Few, was set to replace Mark at some point as Gonzaga's next coach. But when Arizona offers the job, you don't turn that down. And now, at least theoretically, we could have the Zags and the Wildcats, Tommy Lloyd and Mark Few, meeting in a national championship game. This would be sickening for both men because they really care about each other. They're incredibly close, and somebody's great would be another year. I think Gonzaga's the better team. I think Gonzaga's been the best team in the country pretty much all. And yet, this year, the Zags, after one opportunity after another, I think the Zags get the championship.
All right, Gonzaga in an all-West NCAA championship game in Gary's bracket, getting by Arizona to finally get it done for Mark Few and company in Spokane. You can get in on the games by joining Bracket Games on the CBS Sports app or at cbssports.com/bracket. Have a chance to win a trip to next year's Final Four. You can pick the men's and the women's tournament.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.